"Can you wed my daughter?" asked the Apache chief. The lonely rancher shocked them all. The rifle barrel pressed cold against Jack Porter's temple as he reached for his coffee. 3 Apache warriors surrounded his breakfast campfire, their faces painted for war. The eldest one, wearing a chief's headdress, spoke in perfect English. "Can you wed my daughter?" The question hung in the morning air like gun smoke. Jack's hand froze halfway to his cup. He'd been running cattle alone in the Arizona Territory for 5 years, hadn't seen another white face in months. Now this. The chief's dark eyes watched him with an intensity that made Jack's spine tingle. Behind the chief stood a young woman, maybe 20 years old, her face expressionless but her eyes blazing with something Jack couldn't identify. Anger, maybe? Or fear? "I don't understand," Jack said slowly, keeping his hands visible. The warrior to his left pressed the rifle harder against his skull. The chief raised one hand and the pressure eased slightly. "My daughter, Morning Sky, needs a husband." "You are the one." Jack's mind raced. This had to be some kind of test, some tribal custom he'd violated without knowing. He'd been careful to respect their land, never took more game than he needed, always left offerings at the sacred sites. "Why me?" Jack asked. The chief's expression didn't change. "You saved my grandson from the mountain lion last winter. You didn't know he was Apache. You didn't know his family. You just saved him. This is a debt." Morning Sky stepped forward then, and Jack saw the flash of defiance in her eyes. "She didn't want this any more than he did," the chief continued. "The white soldiers killed her husband 2 moons ago. Killed him for nothing, for being Apache. Now she carries shame. A widow with no protector," our people whisper. "Some young warriors see her as available. It brings dishonor. She needs a husband quickly. You are honest. You are strong. You will do." Jack looked at Morning Sky again. She stared back at him with a mixture of pride and desperation that made his chest tight. "What if I say no?" Jack asked. The chief's face remained stone. "Then you insult my family. You refuse to honor the dead. My warriors will be disappointed." The implication was clear as desert sky. Jack would never leave this canyon alive. But there was something else in the chief's eyes. Something that looked almost like hope. Like he was betting everything on Jack being the man he thought he was. Jack stood slowly. The rifles tracked his movement. He looked at Morning Sky, really looked at her. Saw the exhaustion in her shoulders. The weight she carried. The impossible situation she'd been thrust into. He knew what it felt like to be alone in a hostile world. He'd been running from his own past for 5 years. Maybe this was fate's way of telling him to stop running. "I have conditions," Jack said. The warriors tensed. The chief's eyebrow raised slightly. Jack continued, I won't take a wife who doesn't choose me. She has to agree, out loud. Right here. And if she agrees, I protect her. I provide for her. I treat her with respect. But I won't be used as a pawn in tribal politics." Morning Sky's eyes widened. No one had asked her opinion about anything in months. The chief studied Jack for a long moment. Then he turned to his daughter and spoke in Apache. She responded in the same language, her voice rising with emotion. They argued back and forth for several minutes while Jack stood there, acutely aware of the rifles still pointed at him. Finally, Morning Sky turned to face Jack directly. She spoke in halting English. "You are strange, man. White man who keeps promises." "I agree. We marry. But I also have condition. You must let me keep my grief. I loved my husband." "I will honor his memory," Jack nodded. "That's fair." The chief's face broke into the first smile Jack had seen. He clapped his hands once and the warriors lowered their weapons. "Good. We have ceremony tonight. You come to our village. Bring nothing. We provide everything." Jack's head spun. "Tonight?" The chief's smile widened slightly. "Debt must be paid quickly. Honor must be restored." "You agree or you don't? What is your answer, Jack Porter?" Jack looked at Morning Sky one more time, saw the slight nod she gave him. The smallest acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, this could work. He took a deep breath. "I agree." The chief clasped Jack's shoulder with surprising strength. "Then we prepare. You are now family." The warriors began gathering Jack's camp gear with practiced efficiency. One of them kicked dirt over his fire. Another started saddling his horse. Jack stood there wondering what in God's name he'd just agreed to. Morning Sky approached him while the others worked. She spoke quietly. "You could have run. Could have fought. Why did you agree?" Jack met her eyes. "Because running hasn't gotten me anywhere, and fighting everything just makes you tired. Maybe it's time to try something different." She studied his face for a long moment. Then the smallest smile touched her lips. "You are either very wise or very stupid." We will see which. She walked away to join her father, leaving Jack alone with his thoughts and the growing realization that his lonely life as a rancher had just ended forever. The village appeared in the valley below as the sun reached its peak. Jack counted at least 50 teepees arranged in careful circles. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Children played near the stream. It looked peaceful, normal. Nothing like the war party he'd expected. The chief led the way down the steep trail, with Jack and Morning Sky following. The warriors rode behind them, rifles ready, but no longer pointed at Jack's head. That felt like progress. As they entered the village, people stopped what they were doing to stare. An old woman dropped her basket. A young boy pointed, and his mother quickly pulled his hand down. Jack kept his eyes forward, trying to project a confidence he didn't feel. Morning Sky rode beside him now, her spine straight, her face composed. She looked every inch a chief's daughter, proud and untouchable. Jack wondered what she really thought about all this. The chief dismounted in front of the largest teepee and gestured for Jack to do the same. Inside. We talk before ceremony. Jack followed him through the entrance flap. The interior was dim and cool, decorated with painted hides and weapons that looked both ceremonial and deadly. The chief sat cross-legged on a buffalo robe and indicated Jack should do the same. A woman appeared with a clay pot and 2 cups. She poured something that smelled like herbs and smoke, then disappeared without a word. "Drink," the chief said. "It is tradition." Jack lifted the cup and took a sip. It tasted bitter and earthy, but not unpleasant. The chief drank as well, then set his cup down. "You wonder why I do this? Why I force my daughter to marry a white man? It is a fair question." Jack waited. He'd learned that silence often got better answers than questions. The chief continued, "The world is changing. The white men come like locusts. They take and take. Soon there will be no room for Apache. No room for the old ways." Jack wanted to argue, but couldn't. He'd seen the same thing. Seen the railroad pushing west. Seen the towns growing. Seen the cavalry patrols getting bigger and bolder. The chief's dark eyes locked on his. "My daughter's first husband was a warrior. Strong, brave, traditional. The soldiers shot him in the back while he was fishing, unarmed. They said he was a threat. He was 22 years old." Jack felt sick. He'd heard stories like this before, but hearing it from a father made it real in a way it hadn't been. "Morning Sky believes the old ways will save our people," the chief said. "She is wrong. The old ways are dying. But if she marries you, if she learns to live in both worlds, maybe her children will survive what is coming. Maybe they will be strong enough to walk in 2 worlds. That is why I choose you. Not just because of the debt. Because I see you understand loss. You understand what it means to be caught between 2 lives." Jack's throat tightened. The chief saw too much. "What happened to you, Jack Porter?" the chief asked gently. "What did you run from?" Jack stared at his cup. He hadn't talked about it in 5 years. Hadn't even let himself think about it much. But something about this moment, this strange tobacco-scented teepee with a chief who saw through him like glass, made the words come. "I had a ranch in Texas. A wife, a son. Comanche raiders came one night. I was out checking the north fence. By the time I got back, it was over." He stopped, unable to continue. The chief nodded slowly. "So you understand? You understand what Morning Sky feels. The emptiness, the anger. The guilt that you survived when they did not." Jack's hands clenched into fists. "Yes, I understand." "That's why you will be good for her," the chief said. "And she will be good for you. You both need to learn that surviving is not betraying the dead. That moving forward is not forgetting. That maybe the spirits brought you together for a reason neither of you can see yet." Before Jack could respond, the teepee flap opened and an elderly man entered. He wore feathers and shells, and carried a staff carved with symbols Jack didn't recognize. "The medicine man," the chief said. "He will perform the ceremony. It will be in Apache. You don't need to understand the words. You just need to mean your promise. Can you do that?" Jack thought about Morning Sky's eyes, about the weight she carried, about his own 5 years of running, about the chief's words, about walking in 2 worlds. He nodded. "I can do that." The medicine man began chanting. The chief stood and gestured for Jack to follow. They exited the teepee into blinding sunlight. The entire village had gathered in a circle around a central fire. Morning Sky stood on the opposite side, now dressed in white deerskin decorated with beads and quills. She looked beautiful and terrified. Their eyes met across the flames. Jack walked to her side as the medicine man continued his chant. The ceremony moved through rituals Jack didn't understand. The medicine man tied their wrists together with braided rope. He painted symbols on their foreheads. He burned sage and cedar, wafting the smoke over them. Through it all, Morning Sky stood rigid beside Jack, her face giving nothing away. But Jack could feel her hand trembling where the rope bound them together. He gave her fingers a gentle squeeze. She squeezed back. It was the first real connection they'd made. When the medicine man finally cut the rope and stepped back, the chief raised his arms. It is done. Jack Porter is now family. He is Apache. He is one of us. Morning Sky is his wife. He is her protector. Any who challenge this, challenge me. His voice carried across the village with unmistakable authority. No one spoke. No one moved. Then an old woman began ululating, and suddenly the whole village erupted in celebration. Drums started beating. Someone produced a flute. Children ran circles around the fire. Morning Sky turned to Jack. Now we feast. Then we go to your ranch. Start new life. Her English was getting better with each sentence. Or maybe she'd been holding back before. Jack couldn't tell. They make me teepee there? She asked. Jack blinked. I have a cabin. Wood cabin. She frowned. Cabin is white man way. Teepee is better. Air flows. Close to earth. Jack almost smiled. This was going to be interesting. We can have both. Cabin for winter. Teepee for summer. How's that? She considered this. That is acceptable compromise. The feast lasted hours. Jack was offered food he couldn't identify but ate anyway. Some of it was surprisingly good. Some of it was challenging. He drank something fermented that made his head buzz. Through it all, Morning Sky sat beside him, occasionally translating when someone spoke to him in Apache. The warriors who'd held rifles to his head that morning now clapped him on the shoulder and offered him drinks. The transformation was dizzying. As the sun set and the fire burned low, the chief approached them. You leave in morning. Take 3 horses. 1 for riding, 2 for packing. We send gifts, food, blankets, tools. You will need them. My daughter has never lived away from her people. This will be hard for her. Be patient. Jack nodded. I will. The chief turned to Morning Sky and spoke in Apache. G replied briefly, then stood and walked toward a teepee at the edge of the village. Jack started to follow, but the chief caught his arm. Tonight you sleep in the unmarried men's lodge. Tomorrow you begin your life together. Tonight she says goodbye to her old life. Give her that. Jack spent a restless night surrounded by young Apache warriors who snored and muttered in their sleep. He stared at the smoke hole in the teepee's roof, watching stars wheel across the sky, and wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. Marriage to a woman who barely spoke his language, a woman who loved a dead man, a woman who would probably hate living on an isolated ranch with only a white stranger for company. This was insane. But somehow, it also felt right in a way Jack couldn't explain. Morning came too fast. Morning Sky was already loading the pack horses when Jack emerged from the lodge. She'd changed back into practical leather clothing, her ceremonial dress packed away. She worked with quick efficiency, securing bundles with practiced knots. Jack walked over to help. She glanced at him. You know how to pack horse correctly? I've been packing horses since I was 10, Jack said. She raised an eyebrow. Show me. It felt like a test. They worked side by side as the village slowly woke around them. Jack noticed people watching from teepee entrances, but no one approached. When everything was loaded, the chief appeared with a rifle. This is for you. Winchester. Good gun. You will need it where you live. Mountain lions, bears, maybe worse. Jack accepted it with both hands. Thank you, I'll take good care of your daughter. The chief's expression softened slightly. That is why I chose you. Morning Sky embraced her father for a long moment. He spoke quietly to her in Apache. She nodded against his shoulder, and Jack saw tears on her cheeks for the first time. Then she pulled away, wiped her face, and swung onto her horse in one smooth motion. Jack mounted his own horse. The chief raised his hand in farewell. Go. Begin your new path. May the spirits watch over you both. They rode out of the village in silence. Jack kept looking back until the teepees disappeared behind a ridge. When he finally faced forward again, Morning Sky was watching him. You will miss them? He asked. Every day, she said quietly. But this is my path now. We do not look back. We go forward. Jack nodded. Forward it is. They rode toward his ranch, 2 strangers bound by ceremony and circumstance, heading into an uncertain future together. The ranch appeared as the afternoon sun began its descent. Jack's cabin stood small and weathered against the vast landscape, with a corral and a barn that had seen better days. Morning Sky reined in her horse and studied it all with an unreadable expression. This is your home? This is our home now, Jack corrected. She made a sound that might have been approval or disappointment. It is very alone. Very quiet. Jack dismounted. I like quiet. She slid off her horse. I am used to many people, many voices. This will be different. They stood there awkwardly until Jack cleared his throat. I'll show you inside. The cabin was sparse. One room with a fireplace, a table, 2 chairs, a bed in the corner, shelves with supplies, few books. Morning Sky walked the perimeter slowly, touching things. Where do I sleep? Jack felt his face heat. I'll build another room. Until then, I can sleep in the barn. She turned to face him. You are my husband now. Why would you sleep in barn? Because we don't know each other, Jack said. Because you loved someone else. Because this whole situation is strange enough without making it stranger. Morning Sky's expression softened slightly. You are considerate, man. This is good, but also foolish. We are married. People will talk if husband sleeps in barn. It brings shame. Jack rubbed his face. So what do you suggest? She pointed at the bed. We share, but you stay on your side. I stay on mine. If you cross the middle, I have knife. She said it so matter-of-factly that Jack almost laughed. Fair enough. They spent the rest of the day unloading the horses and settling in. Morning Sky organized the gifts from her village with practiced efficiency. She rearranged his shelves, muttering in Apache about white men and their lack of order. That evening, Jack cooked stew over the fire. Morning Sky watched him critically. You cook wrong. Meat is too long in pot. Becomes tough. Jack stirred the pot defensively. I've been cooking like this for 5 years and I'm not dead yet. She snorted. Not dead does not mean good. Tomorrow I cook. You will see difference. Despite himself, Jack smiled. You're probably right. They ate in silence, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Jack wanted to ask her questions about her life, her first husband, what she really thought about all this, but the words wouldn't come. After dinner, Morning Sky stood abruptly. I go outside. Need air. Jack nodded and she disappeared through the door. He cleaned the dishes and tried not to think about the sleeping arrangements. When she still hadn't returned an hour later, he started to worry. He found her sitting on a rock behind the cabin, staring at the stars. She didn't acknowledge his approach. In my village, my mother would be in the teepee next to mine. My sisters would visit every day. My friends would help with work. Here there is nothing. No one. Just empty land and silence. Jack sat down nearby, careful to leave space between them. I know it's hard. Being alone. That's why I came here. To be alone. But maybe we don't have to be lonely. Morning Sky looked at him sharply. What is difference? Jack considered. Alone is a choice. Lonely is what happens when you want connection but can't find it. We're both alone out here, but maybe we don't have to be lonely. She turned back to the stars. You talk in circles like medicine man. But maybe you're right. Maybe we make our own village. Just 2 people. Small village. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the night sky. Eventually, Morning Sky stood. I am tired. We sleep now. They walked back to the cabin together. Jack banked the fire while she changed behind a blanket she'd strung up as a screen. When he finally climbed into his side of the bed, she was already lying rigid on her side, as far from the middle as possible. The knife she'd mentioned lay on the floor beside her within easy reach. Jack lay on his back, staring at the ceiling beams, acutely aware of her breathing. Sleep came in fits and starts. Sometime deep in the night, Jack woke to the sound of crying. Morning Sky was curled into a ball, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He lay frozen, unsure what to do. Then her hand reached across the invisible middle line, searching. Without thinking, he took it. She gripped his fingers like a lifeline, crying harder. Jack squeezed back, offering the only comfort he knew how. Neither of them spoke. After a while, her breathing steadied. Her grip loosened, but she didn't let go. They fell asleep like that, hands clasped across the divide. Morning brought awkwardness. Morning Sky released his hand and was up before dawn, the moment carefully ignored. She took over the kitchen with a determination that made Jack wisely stay out of her way. She cooked something with cornmeal and herbs that tasted infinitely better than anything Jack had made in years. See, she said triumphantly. I told you. You cook wrong. Jack ate 3 helpings. You were right. This is delicious. She looked pleased, despite herself. Of course I am right. I am Chief's daughter. We are always right. The hint of humor in her voice made Jack hopeful. They fell into a routine over the following weeks. Morning Sky proved herself capable with everything from tending horses to mending fences. She could track game better than Jack, shoot almost as well, and had endless knowledge about plants and weather that Jack had never learned. In return, he taught her to read English better, showed her how to work with cattle, and helped her understand the white man's world that was encroaching on all of them. They worked well together, each respecting the other's skills, but the nights remained difficult. Sometimes Morning Sky cried. Sometimes she had nightmares that left her gasping and scared. Sometimes she just lay awake, and Jack could feel her wakefulness beside him. He never pushed, never asked questions she wasn't ready to answer, just offered his hand across the divide when she needed it. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to soften, began to smile more, began to talk about things beyond just daily tasks. One evening, a month after their arrival at the ranch, Morning Sky turned to Jack as they sat outside watching the sunset. "You saved my father's grandson, the boy with the mountain lion. Tell me about it." Jack shrugged. "There's not much to tell. I was hunting. Heard screaming. Found a kid being attacked by a big cat. Shot it. Kid ran off before I could check if he was hurt. I didn't know he was Apache until your father told me." Morning Sky studied him. "You did not think. You just acted. Yes, that is who you are. You act before thinking. Sometimes this is good. Sometimes this'll get you killed." Jack laughed. "Probably. But I'd rather act and fail than think and do nothing." She nodded slowly. "My first husband was like this. Quick to act, quick to defend, quick to fight. It got him killed." The soldiers did not care that he was fishing, did not care that he was unarmed. They saw Apache and they shot. Jack's chest tightened. "I'm sorry. That shouldn't have happened." Morning Sky's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. "He was good, man. Brave. He made me laugh. We were married 1 year. Just 1 year. Then he was gone." She paused. "I was angry when father said I must marry again. Angry he chose white man. Angry that I had no choice. But now I think maybe he saw something I could not see. Maybe he knew I needed someone different. Someone who would not die trying to fight the world." Jack didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. After a long silence, Morning Sky spoke again. "I am glad it was you. Glad he chose you. You are strange. You cook wrong. You organize supplies wrong. You talk too much sometimes. But you are kind. You are patient. You do not demand things I cannot give. This is good." Jack felt something warm spread through his chest. "Thank you. That means a lot." She looked at him directly. "I think we will be okay. Not today, not tomorrow. But someday. I think we will find a way to be more than strangers sharing bed." Winter came hard and fast. Snow piled high around the cabin. The wind howled through cracks they hadn't known existed. Morning Sky proved invaluable, her knowledge of surviving harsh conditions far exceeding Jack's. She showed him how to insulate the cabin with mud and grass, how to preserve food better, how to keep the horses healthy in brutal cold. They spent long evenings by the fire, talking more as the forced proximity broke down the last of their walls. Morning Sky told him about growing up as the chief's daughter, about learning to ride before she could walk, about her mother who had died when she was 12, about her sisters who had married into other tribes, about the freedom of Apache life before the white men came in overwhelming numbers. Jack listened, fascinated by a world so different from his own. In return, he told her about his childhood in Missouri, his first ranch, the family he'd lost. They shared their grief like a bridge between them. One particularly brutal night, the temperature dropped so low that ice formed on the inside of the windows. Morning Sky shivered despite the fire and the blankets. Jack hesitated, then said quietly, "We'd be warmer if we shared body heat." She looked at him for a long moment. "Just for warmth?" "Just for warmth. I promise." She nodded and moved to the middle of the bed. Jack wrapped his arms around her and she curled against his chest. They fit together surprisingly well. Morning Sky's shivering gradually stopped. "This is nice," she whispered. "Yes," Jack agreed. "It is." After that night, they slept curled together. The knife disappeared from beside the bed. The invisible dividing line erased itself. They still hadn't crossed certain boundaries, but the companionship grew deeper. Morning Sky's smiles came easier. Her laughter rang out more often. Jack found himself looking forward to each day, to her presence, to the life they were building together. It wasn't what either of them had planned, but it was becoming something real. Spring arrived with sudden violence. The snow melted in rushing torrents. The land transformed from white to green almost overnight. Morning Sky spent hours outside, clearly relieved to be free of the cabin's confines. She started construction on the teepee Jack had promised her, working with materials she'd gathered and stored all winter. Jack helped when she'd let him, but mostly he watched her work with skilled hands, creating something beautiful and functional. The day she finished the teepee, she invited him inside. They sat cross-legged on buffalo robes, the afternoon sun filtering through the hide walls. "This feels like home," she said softly. "First time since leaving my village. Thank you for letting me build it." Jack smiled. "It's your home, too. You can build whatever you want." She reached over and took his hand. "You have been patient with me. Let me honor my grief. Let me heal slowly. You are a good husband even though this marriage is strange." Jack squeezed her fingers. "You've been patient with me, too. Taught me things. Made this place feel less empty. We're a good team." Morning Sky leaned closer. "I think I am ready. Ready for this to be real marriage. Not just sharing warmth, not just friendship. Real partnership." Jack's heart hammered. "Are you sure?" "I don't want you to feel pressured." She touched his face gently. "I am sure. I will always love my first husband. His memory lives here." She pressed her hand to her heart. "But I think I can love you too. A different love, quieter love. But real." Then her cheek. Then, finally, her lips. She kissed him back with a fierceness that took his breath away. That night marked a turning point. They became truly married in every sense. Morning Sky moved her things into the teepee, and Jack joined her there, the cabin becoming just storage and winter quarters. They worked the ranch together as true partners, their different skills complementing each other perfectly. Morning Sky's knowledge of the land and animals, combined with Jack's experience as a cattleman, made them more successful than Jack had ever been alone. Months passed, then a year. Morning Sky's English became flawless. Jack learned enough Apache to communicate with her family when they visited. The visits started cautiously but grew more frequent as the chief saw his daughter thriving. The village began to trust Jack, seeing him not as a white man who'd stolen one of their own, but as family who'd chosen to walk in both worlds. Young warriors asked his advice. Children played around his feet during visits. He'd found acceptance he'd never expected. One autumn evening, Morning Sky called Jack to the teepee with unusual urgency. He found her sitting on their bed, her face glowing with news she could barely contain. "I am with child." Jack's world stopped. "We will have baby. Next spring." Jack dropped to his knees beside her. "Are you sure?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I am sure," Medicine Woman confirmed it. "We are going to be parents." Jack pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed with emotion. This child would walk in two worlds from birth, would carry both their heritages, would be a bridge between cultures. They spent the winter preparing. Morning Sky's family brought gifts and advice. Jack built a cradle with his own hands, carving protective symbols Morning Sky showed him. They argued playfully about names, about traditions, about whether to raise the child more Apache or more white. Both, they finally agreed. The child would be both, and that would be their strength. As Morning Sky's belly grew, so did Jack's sense of purpose. He wasn't running anymore. He wasn't just surviving. He was building a future. The baby came on a warm spring day, delivered by the village medicine woman with Morning Sky's mother and sisters in attendance. Jack paced outside the teepee, more terrified than he'd ever been facing down mountain lions or cattle rustlers. When the crying started, he rushed inside to find Morning Sky exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle. "A son," she said, "strong like his father, brave like his mother." Jack touched the baby's tiny hand, watching miniature fingers curl around his own, and felt something shift in his chest. This was what he'd been missing. This was home. They named him Running Wolf Porter, Wolf for his Apache heritage, Porter for his white heritage, running because he came into the world squalling and active. The chief performed the naming ceremony with the whole village present. Later, Jack had the name recorded at the territory office, making sure his son would be recognized by both cultures. It felt important, this dual acknowledgement. This child would need both worlds to survive what was coming. Running Wolf grew quickly, as children do. He had Morning Sky's dark eyes and Jack's stubborn chin. By his first birthday, he was walking and getting into everything. By 2, he could say words in both English and Apache. The village children adored him. The white families in the distant town treated him with cautious curiosity. He belonged everywhere and nowhere, and his parents were determined to make that an advantage rather than a burden. 5 years after the day the chief had asked Jack to wed his daughter, Jack stood outside the teepee watching his son play with wooden horses Jack had carved. Morning Sky emerged and slipped her hand into his. You are happy? She asked. Happier than I knew how to be, Jack replied honestly. You? She leaned against his shoulder. I am happy too. I have good life, good husband, good son. I honor my first husband's memory, but I live in present. This is balance I did not think possible. Jack kissed the top of her head. Thank you for taking a chance on a strange white rancher. She laughed. Thank you for agreeing to crazy arrangement, for being patient, for letting me bring teepee to your ranch, for walking in my world while I walk in yours. Jack watched Running Wolf gallop around on an imaginary horse, whooping like a warrior. We're making something new. Not Apache, not white, something that's both and neither. Something that might survive what's coming. Morning Sky nodded. Yes. We are teaching him to be strong in both worlds, to take best from each. This is our legacy. The ranch had grown over the years. More cattle, better fences, a bigger cabin for winter, though they still preferred the teepee. Other families, both white and Apache, had started settling nearby, drawn by Jack and Morning Sky's example of cooperation. It wasn't always easy. There were still prejudices on both sides. Still violence in the territory. Still soldiers who didn't care about the difference between peaceful Apache and raiders. But their little corner of Arizona had become a place where people tried, where they built bridges instead of walls. One day, a rider approached from the direction of town. Jack recognized him as Ben Carter, one of the few townspeople who'd always treated Morning Sky with respect. Ben dismounted, his face grim. Jack, we got trouble. Cavalry's coming through next week. New commander. Heard he's one of those Indian hater types. Been talking about moving all Apache to reservations by force if necessary. Jack's blood ran cold. Morning Sky had come out of the teepee, Running Wolf on her hip. Her face went pale. Ben continued. Some of us are organizing. White folks who've been living peaceful with the Apache make it clear that there are families here, not hostiles. Farms and ranches. People just trying to live. We thought you and Morning Sky should know. Maybe you'd want to speak? Tell your story? Jack looked at his wife. She nodded slowly. We speak. We show them we can live together, that not all Apache need to be on reservation, that not all white men are enemies. The next week, 20 families gathered on the road to meet the cavalry. Half were white settlers. Half were Apache from the chief's village. They stood together as the soldiers approached, a show of unity that made the cavalry commander rein in hard. He was a young captain with suspicious eyes and a hand that kept drifting to his sidearm. What's this? He demanded. We're here to talk, Ben Carter said calmly, to explain how things work in this area. The captain's lip curled. I don't need explanations from civilians. I have orders. Jack stepped forward, Morning Sky beside him, Running Wolf watching from her arms. Captain, my name is Jack Porter. This is my wife, Morning Sky. This is our son. We have a ranch about 10 miles from here. We've been married 5 years, living peaceful, working together. The captain stared at Morning Sky, then at Jack, then at their clearly mixed heritage child. You married a savage? Jack felt Morning Sky tense, but he kept his voice level. I married a woman. A skilled rancher, a loving mother. The daughter of a chief who believes in peace. The chief himself stepped forward then, resplendent in his ceremonial dress. I am Chief Grey Eagle. These are my people. We want no war. We farm. We hunt. We live. We trade with white neighbors. We harm no one. The captain looked like he'd swallowed something sour. The government says all Apache must be on reservations for safety. The chief's expression didn't change. Safety for who? We are safe here. White neighbors are safe here. Only people who are not safe are the ones who come to make war where there is peace. A murmur of agreement ran through the crowd. The captain looked around, clearly reassessing. He'd expected to find hostile Indians. Instead, he'd found families, children, people living together. His certainty wavered. I have orders, he repeated, but with less conviction. Jack saw the opening. Captain, you have orders to protect settlers and move hostile Apache to reservations. We're asking you to look around. Are we hostile? Are the settlers here asking for protection from their neighbors? The captain's jaw worked. One of his sergeants leaned over and whispered something. Finally, the captain spoke. I'll report to my superiors that this area is peaceful, that the local Apache are farming and trading, that the settlers have no complaints, but if there's trouble, if raids start, this arrangement ends. Understood? The chief nodded. Understood. We keep peace. We police our own. Any Apache who makes trouble answers to me first. The captain wheeled his horse. We'll be watching. With that, the cavalry rode away, leaving the gathered families in relieved silence. Ben Carter let out a huge breath. That could have gone worse. A lot worse. The chief turned to Jack and Morning Sky. You spoke well. Both of you. Showed them what is possible. Morning Sky touched her father's arm. We just told truth. Truth is powerful. The chief smiled. Yes, but not everyone is brave enough to stand and speak truth when soldiers come with guns. You were brave. He looked at Running Wolf. And this one will be brave too. He will walk in both worlds and make them better. It is good future. Jack felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. They'd won today, but it was just one battle. That night, after Running Wolf was asleep, Jack and Morning Sky sat outside the teepee. She was quiet, thoughtful. What are you thinking? Jack asked. She took a long time to answer. I am thinking that my father was right. That day he brought warriors to your camp when he asked you to marry me. He saw something I could not see. He saw that the world was changing, that the old ways were dying, that we needed to find new ways. I was so angry then. I thought he betrayed our people by giving me to white man. And now? Jack asked gently. Now I see he saved me. Saved our family. Saved part of our culture. Running Wolf knows Apache ways. He speaks the language, he knows the stories, but he also knows white ways. He can read. He can work with cattle. He can talk to soldiers without fear. He is bridge. And maybe bridges are what we need most. Jack pulled her close. We need teachers too. People who can show both sides, that we're more alike than different, that we can live together. Morning Sky nodded against his chest. She continued. Sometimes I wonder about my first husband. Wonder what he would think of my life now. Wonder if he would understand. Jack kissed her hair. He'd want you to be happy. Want you to be safe. Want his people to survive. You're honoring his memory by living. By teaching your son. By building something that lasts. Morning Sky was quiet for a moment. You are a wise man, Jack Porter. Foolish sometimes, but wise when it matters. Jack laughed. I'll take that. They sat together under the stars, the same stars that had watched over them that first night at the Apache village, and Jack marveled at how far they'd come. Years continued to pass. Running Wolf grew into a strong young man who could track like an Apache and rope like a cowboy. The ranch prospered. More families settled nearby, creating a community that worked across cultural lines. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, still prejudices, still violence in other parts of the territory. But their corner of Arizona became known as a place where things were different, where people tried. Jack and Morning Sky became elders of sorts, teaching young couples how to navigate mixed marriages, how to raise children in two worlds, how to build bridges instead of walls. The chief lived to see 3 grandchildren from Morning Sky and Jack, peacefully in his teepee, surrounded by family, his last words a blessing for the future. Morning Sky grieved deeply, but with the strength of someone who'd learned to carry loss without being destroyed by it. Jack stood beside her through it all, the partner she'd never expected to have but couldn't imagine being without. They'd become the thing the chief had hoped for, a living example that 2 worlds could meet and make something beautiful. One evening, 20 years after that fateful morning when rifles had surrounded Jack's campfire, he sat outside with Morning Sky watching the sunset. Running Wolf was working his own ranch now, married to a woman who was half Mexican and half white, continuing the tradition of bringing cultures together. Their grandchildren played nearby, a mixture of 3 heritages and countless possibilities. You ever regret it? Jack asked. That day your father asked me to marry you? Morning Sky smiled, the lines around her eyes crinkling in the way Jack had come to love. Never. Not once, even when I thought I would. Even when it was hard. Never. You? Never, Jack agreed. Best decision I never made. Morning Sky laughed at that, the sound carrying across the land they'd built a life on together. They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the sun sink below the horizon and paint the sky in colors that belonged to no single culture, but to the land itself, ancient and enduring, and free.